Alright, with the end of the 3.2 version livestream, here's my complete build guide on Castorice. In this video, we first go through her kit, followed by her Eidolons and how good they are. Then we move on to her builds, including her best relics and Lightcones, and finally her best synergies. So leave a like if you find this video helpful. Also, please check the pinned comment in case of any changes or mistakes on my part. And with that, let's get started. So, Castorice. She's an HP scaling quantum unit following the path of remembrance. Her Memosprite is a dragon and its name is Netherwing Pullux. She's a main DPS who plays kinda similar to Jinglu, where every time she attacks, she consumes HP from all allies, so having a dedicated healer in the team is a must. Also, her ultimate works on a point system instead of energy. And finally, she does not consume any skill points. So in battle, she is either SP neutral or SP positive if you use her basic. Looking at her base stats, she has the current highest HP in the game, dethroning Maide just after one patch. Her attack and defense are low, but it doesn't really matter as she scales off HP. She has a 95 base speed and of course no energy cost as she uses points for her ultimate. Starting off with her traces, her basic attack is a single target hit dealing quantum damage. Nothing new. Her skill is a blast attack that consumes 30% of all allies' current HP, not max HP, so keep that in mind, and deals blast quantum damage to 3 enemies. She also has an enhanced skill which consumes 40% of all allies' HP and then unleashes a joint attack dealing quantum damage to all enemies. This enhanced skill unlocks when her dragon is present on the field. As for how to summon it, for that, we need to look at her talent and her ultimate. First, her talent. She has a unique point system called New Bud, which is based on the levels of your characters on the field. They didn't really provide any multipliers here, but if you have 4 level 80 characters, the max New Bud becomes 34,000. As for how we gain these points, for each point of HP lost by all allies, Castorice gains 1 point of New Bud, and when you reach maximum points, her ultimate gets unlocked. There are some other effects as well, like when allies lose HP, both Castorice and the dragon's damage is increased by 20%, and this can stack up to 3 times and last for 3 turns. And given how frequently they consume HP, they will pretty much have a 100% uptime on a 60% damage boost. Finally, when a dragon is present on the field, New Bud cannot be gained, and any HP loss from all allies will become healing for the dragon. Now for her ultimate, she summons her Memosprite and immediately gives it a 100% action advance. Also, she creates a territory called Lost Netherland, which is kinda similar to a field. While this field is active, enemies will have their all type resistance decreased by 20%. Now for the dragon stats, their base speed is 165 and max HP is equal to 100% of max New Bud points. So basically 34,000 if you have all level 80 units. Also, the dragon disappears after taking 3 turns or when their HP becomes 0. They leave the field and also dispel the territory Lost Netherland. Finally, we have a technique. It's a bunch of text, but TLDR, after using a technique, she enters a unique state that scares away any approaching enemies. And when entering battle by hitting a target, a bunch of stuff happens at once. She first consumes 40% of all allies' HP and gains 30% of max New Bud points. Then she instantly summons her dragon, also giving it a 100% action advance, and then creates the Lost Netherland territory, which reduces enemy resistance. It's pretty much an insta ultimate right after entering combat. The only different thing is that when summoning the dragon with her technique, the dragon will start with only 50% of his max HP, and that's pretty much it. Now time for the Memosprite Traces. The dragon has 2 skills. I'll call it skill 1 and skill 2, and you have to use them in combination. The skill 2 consumes 25% of the dragon's max HP and deals AoE quantum damage. The unique thing about this is that after using this skill, your turn will not end. You can use this skill 2 repeatedly, and every time you use it, the damage multiplier increases. It reaches the highest damage multiplier with the 3rd skill 2, and this increase in multiplier stays even after the dragon disappears. So basically, you only need to ramp it up once. Now the catch here is that when using the skill 2 at or below 25% of his max HP, it will trigger one of the extra passives, which says when the dragon disappears, it deals 6 instances of quantum damage to a single random target and also heals all allies. So usually, the dragon can take 3 turns before it disappears, but if you use the skill 2 at or below 25% HP, it instantly disappears, which is also a playstyle that I'll discuss later. But in most cases, you want to make sure you take the full 3 turns with the dragon, and for that, you need to use his skill 2 based on how much HP the dragon has. At the start with full HP, you can use the skill 2 3 times. That will bring his HP to 25%, and to end the turn, you need to use the skill 1, which is also an AoE attack, but this will end the turn. So overall, you use a skill 2 based on how much HP the dragon has, and then end the turn with the skill 1 if his HP is below 25%. For the talent, when the dragon is present on the field, it acts as a backup HP for the team. That is, when allies consume HP or take damage, their HP can at most reduce to 1. After that, any HP loss will be transferred to the dragon, but it will take 5 times the damage, given the high max HP. We also have the second extra passive. When the dragon is summoned, all allies' damage is increased by 10% for 3 turns. Lastly, there is the unique effect, or the global passive that players are calling it. It's a very unique effect, which is exclusive to Castorice right now. It says, after obtaining Castorice, or when she is in the team, they receive a unique effect, which means she doesn't have to be on the team to trigger it. As long as she is in your account, the effect will trigger. The effect itself is basically a one-time immortality. It says, when any ally receives a killing blow, all allies that receive that killing blow in that action enters the mono-cocoon state. Characters in that state don't instantly die. They become kind of immortal for that one turn. Before their next turn ends, if their HP increases, meaning if they are healed, or they gain a shield, they stay alive and the mono-cocoon state is removed. If that doesn't happen, they instantly die after that turn. This can happen one time per battle. As I said, this is basically a one-time immortality buff, which prevents them from dying in a single action, like any crazy one-shot attack from the enemy. This can be really helpful or not as much, depending on the type of enemies we face in future endgame challenges. For Trace level up priority, as a main DPS, I would always recommend maxing her out, but for a simple roadmap, you should first level up the Memosprite skill, the Memosprite talent, and the normal skill, as they deal all the damage. Then go for the ultimate and the normal talent, as both have important buffs, like damage increase and resistance down. Lastly, you can level up the basic attack, or you can leave it at level 1, as you will never really use her basic attack in battle anyways. Now for Castorice's passives. For first passive, after any ally, aside from the dragon, receives healing, that heal is converted into new birth points for Castorice's ultimate. And if the dragon is present on the field, then that healing will be converted into healing for the dragon. The amount cannot be higher than 12% of new bird's maximum limit. Basically, with this passive, the dragon cannot be healed more than 12% of their HP in a single heal, and this value gets reset after any unit takes turn. For her second passive, when Castorice's HP is at or higher than 50%, her speed is increased by 40%. Also, while using the skill 2 of the dragon, if any enemy dies or take lethal damage, the dragon's speed is increased by 100% for one turn. This is similar to Zealous Resurgence effect, where instead of getting an extra turn, the dragon gets a speed increase. Finally, for the third passive, each time the dragon uses skill 2, their damage is increased by 30%, and this can stack up to 6 times, and last until the end of the turn. Now realistically, you can never get the max damage boost from this, which is 180% at E0, because at most, you can only use the skill 2 4 times at once, and then the HP drops to 0. You need to use the skill 2 6 times to get the full damage boost, and the only way to do this is with her E2, which I'll go into more details with her Eidolons. For her bonus stats, after maxing out her traces, Castorice gets 18.7% crit rate, 14.4% quantum damage boost, and 13.3% crit damage. She gets all her most important stats. Hoya really loves this unit. Now, I don't usually do this for other units, but given the complexity and the huge wall of text that Castorice's kit is, I want to discuss her playstyle a bit more. This will provide you an idea on how you should play her. Generally, there are 2 major ways to play Castorice, and all depends on the dragon's skill too. The first is the more generic playstyle, which I call the all 3 turns playstyle, where you use the skill 2 while paying attention to the dragon's HP. You want to maximize the damage and take all 3 turns before the dragon disappears. This is how most players will play Castorice. The second way is for all you zero cyclers, or anyone who wants to finish the battle in less turns. I call it the one turn one shot playstyle. In this playstyle, you stack all the buffs on Castorice right before her ultimate, and after summoning the dragon, use the dragon skill 2 4 times in the first turn, and intentionally make the dragon disappear to trigger the extra passive that deals 6 instants of damage. This way, you get 4 skill 2s and the 6 instants of damage in a single turn. It's the highest amount of damage Castorice can do in a single turn. Now both playstyles have some pros and cons. For the all 3 turn playstyle, it is more easy to execute, you don't need crazy healing, and it is more consistent for longer battles, and for pretty much every type of endgame challenge. But it may take more cycles to finish the battle. For the 1 turn 1 shot playstyle, it can deal massive damage up front in the first turn, which can be really helpful for one-shotting the first wave, and great for zero cycling. But the cost is also high. You need units that can constantly action advance Castorice, so that she can get her ultimate back again for the next wave. And you need solid healers to keep up with the HP drain. It is also not as consistent, especially in Pure Fiction, even though all her attacks are AoE. And also, if your damage is not enough to one-shot the first wave in MOC, well then, your whole rotation falls apart. It's a very high risk, high reward playstyle, great for min-maxers and zero cyclers. But I personally like consistency, so for general players, I'll recommend the all 3 turn playstyle. You can play the 1 turn 1 shot playstyle if you have the suppose and the build to play it. Also, if you have her E2, then I would actually recommend to play the 1 turn 1 shot playstyle, because her whole rotation changes with her E2. Speaking of which, let's discuss her Eidolons. Now first of all, every single calculations you'll see in this video is based on this team with RMC, Tribi, and Gallagher. And secondly, just like with My Day, the overall damage from Castorice heavily depends on how much damage you take and how much you can heal. All these factors are based on different situations, so I couldn't really provide the exact damage difference between every Eidolon, but just like with My Day, I can still discuss the damage output for every single Eidolon separately. So starting with Castorice's E1, when the enemy target's current HP is lower than 80% or 50%, both Castorice's skills and the dragon skills deals 120% or 140% of their original damage respectively. It is similar to Acheron's original damage increase. You can see the damage difference here. I've taken a single 1 turn 1 shot rotation, and you'll see this rotation used in most of the calculations in this video. For this rotation, from E0 to E1, you get around 20% damage increase. Next is her E2, and this completely changes her playstyle. After summoning the dragon, Castorice gains 2 stacks of Ardent Will, which you can only have 2 at a time. And these stacks will offset the HP consumption from the dragon skill 2. So that means you can do 2 extra skill 2s without losing any HP. This also gives 100% action advance to Castorice. That means right after the dragon takes his turn, Castorice will be right behind it, and the next time she uses her enhanced skill, she will gain 30% new bud, which is basically heal for the dragon, as you cannot gain points while the dragon is present. Now this part will only work if you use the all 3 turn rotation, but at E2, I would recommend trying out the 1 turn 1 shot rotation, because as you can see here, with her E2, her rotation completely changes. Here with the 2 Ardent Will stacks, the dragon can use 6 skill 2s, and that will also maximize the passive's damage boost, with 180% at the 6th skill 2. And after that, the dragon will exit the field, dealing 6 instances of damage from his extra passive. And since this is still considered a single turn, that 180% damage boost also works on that exit attack. It's the biggest nuke you can deal in a single turn. And also, since Castorice gets a 100% action advance right after this, it would make it much easier to gain points faster and summon the dragon again. This is the best place to get if you want to hyper invest in your Castorice, and the perfect Eidolon for all you zero cyclers. Castorice's E4 increases the incoming healing of all allies by 20% while she is on the field. This isn't much, but more healing means faster point generation and more healing for the dragon. Lastly, her E6. It gives Castorice and her dragon 20% quantum rest penetration. Also, now the dragon ignores weakness type while dealing damage, and the bounce count from the extra passive is increased by 3. So with this, when the dragon disappears, it will deal 9 instances of damage. It's great, but kinda overkill. She already reduces enemy resistance, and her multipliers are already big enough. I get it, it's her E6, but I think her E2 is more than enough. Overall, I would recommend only till her E2 if you do want to hyper invest in her. But before spending wishes on Eidolons, you need to think about her Lightcones. By the way, if you are enjoying the content, please consider subscribing, as it does help this channel grow and motivates me to make more content for you guys. On to her builds. Given how long the kit explanation part was, this part is going to be much shorter. First, her Lightcones, and this is where her major problem starts. Just like Acheron in our previous anniversary, Castorice heavily depends on her signature Lightcone, but I think in her case it's even worse than Acheron, because there is no option like the Goodnight Sleep Well that we had for Acheron. Not only she is Remembrance, which is a new path, so there are less alternative options in general, but she also scales up HP, making her even more unique. But that also brings out new possibilities. synergies. Her signature Lightcone is obviously her best in slot. It provides high base HP, a massive HP boost, defense ignore and action advance. It's a complete package, hence the wide damage difference. The second best alternative is going to be the pay to win Battle Pass Lightcone at S5. It's basically $50, and even with that, it's around 18% weaker than the signature. Reason is the low base HP with no extra HP boost. The crit rate is nice, but with her best relic set, her bonus stats, and supports like the RMC, it's really easy to overcap on crit. The damage boost is nice, but it's not that much. And now we dive into the unique possibilities. Given Castorice's unique needs and her lack of alternatives, any Lightcones with high base HP, even if they are of a different path, can be pretty solid for her. In this category, we have Miday's Lightcone with the highest base HP in the game, followed by the free-to-play options being Bailu and Clara's Lightcone. Even though the passive won't work because they are not of the same path, the base HP itself is good enough for her. Lastly, Reminiscence is not good. Given the stacks are obtained by taking turns, you can't even get max 4 stacks because the dragon can only take 3 turns. If you have either Clara or Bailu's Lightcone, please use that, or just pull her signature. Also, other options like the MOC Shop Lightcone or the Hertaso Lightcone or even Aglia's Lightcone, all of these are anti-synergistic with Castorice's kit. She does not have any ability that she uses on her allies, so the MOC Lightcone is out. And both the Hertaso Lightcone and Aglia's Lightcone provide speed increase, which will not function with the Poet set, and that set is a must use for her, as you will see in a bit. As for which to choose between her E1 and her signature, always go for her signature Lightcone. Not only it will provide more damage, there is also a higher chance to get it, and you basically have no other good options to use on her, as I showed in the Lightcone section. For her best relics and ornaments, there are only one option to go for, which is the Poet set. This set is just too good to pass up. It provides quantum damage boost and 32% crit rate, which makes it much easier to build her. And for the sake of arguments, here's the damage difference with the Genius set. It's not that much behind the Poet set, but to get that much, you need some really good relic pieces. This is the build I've used for the Genius set, and getting this much crit without a Lightcone that provides crit value is really hard. You can use supports like Sunday, but overall the Poet set is her best option. For ornaments, here as well, the new Bone Collection set is her best and only option. It increases HP and gives crit damage. And this is her only option because unlike Aglia, where she herself deals most of the damage, so we want to buff Aglia herself, and that's why the banana set would work on her. But for Castorice, we want to increase the dragon's damage, so beside the Bone Collection set, any other set just does not work on her. For her stats, here's a build for reference. Everything here is based on free to obtain Lightcones and relics with low substat rolls. So with some farming, you can achieve something like this. For main stats, always use a crit damage body as she already gets tons of crit rate. Use an HP percentage boot, HP% or quantum damage on the sphere and HP% on the rope. Given the amount of damage boost the dragon gets from the third passive and the talent, there is not much difference between an HP percentage sphere and a quantum damage sphere. So just use the one with better substats. Speaking of which, for stat goals, I recommend over 40% crit rate so that with the Poet set, it will be closer to 80%. Around 180 to 200% crit damage, very low speed so that you can trigger the Poet set, and as much HP as you can get. And now finally to her synergies. Now Castorice being a main DPS, you definitely need 2 supports, and with her HP drain mechanics, a healer is a must. So first, let's look at her best sustain options. In this category, there are 2 units who have, in my opinion, the best synergy with Castorice. They are Gallagher and Luocha. Both have out of turn healing. Gallagher with his Besotted debuff and Luocha with his ultimate field. And given the healing is AoE, it not only helps the team stay healthy, it will generate a ton of points for the dragon. Now both also have their pros and cons, which makes them better or worse based on situations. Gallagher's debuff healing is based on the enemies. So if there are 5 enemies with the Besotted debuff, and since most of Castorice's attacks are AoE, and you hit all 5 enemies, the overall healing will be higher. And since this is a debuff, if the enemy is immune or quickly cycles through the debuff, like in Pure Fiction, his overall healing drops by a lot. Luocha's field on the other hand is not affected by enemies, so his healing stays consistent. And then there is Luocha's insta heal that can also generate points for the dragon. Though Gallagher can heal more than Luocha based on the situation, but Luocha is overall more consistent, so just use based on preference. Also, since Castorice does not consume any SP, the extra SP generation from these units can be really helpful for other teammates. For other sustains we have Lingsha and Huohuo. Both pretty much have the same issue, which is the point generation or healing from the dragon has a limit. it can trigger only once per a unit's turn. And since there is no way for other units to trigger the healing, like with Gallagher and Luocha, they can only trigger the passive once per turn. And also the attack buff and the energy from Huohuo is basically useless for Castorice, but it can be used on other units. Overall, they have good healing, but they don't synergize that well with Castorice. Aside from them, any other healer is just worse than these four. And also, if you have Gallagher, then just use him. He's one of our best teammates. Next are supports. The overall best in slot is going to be Tribi. Her buffs are team-wide, and her AoE follow-up attack and ultimate can trigger Gallagher's debuff healing or Luocha's field. She's by far the best support for Castorice. For the second support slot, we have the RMC or Sunday. Both can work here, but there are some weird interactions with Sunday's kit. His frequent action advance, though great for any DPS, but with Castorice, his buffs are very inconsistent. Like, if you action advance Castorice, when the dragon is not present, the buffs will only apply to her. And when the dragon is summoned, due to the 100% action advance, the dragon's first turn won't have Sunday's buffs. Every time the dragon is summoned, Sunday will only be able to buff it from their second turn. And if you're playing the one turn one shot playstyle, then the dragon will literally have no buffs from Sunday. Also, the extra energy does nothing for Castorice. To maximize Sunday's buffs, you kinda have to play the all 3 turns playstyle. On the other hand, with RMC, the crit damage buff is unconditional, and the Mem support is automatically gets applied to the dragon the moment it is summoned. As a result, all the buffs from RMC have consistent uptime. Also, given we have Mem, who is basically a 5th unit on the team with their own HP bar, that means more HP drain from Castorice's skill, and that will generate more points for the dragon. And healing Mem with RMC's skill will also generate points. Overall, they are very close, but I personally recommend RMC over Sunday. He is still better than any other support with action advance, but for Castorice specifically, RMC is slightly better. For alternatives, we have Ruan Mei, Zhao Shou, and Pella. All have either team-wide buffs or AoE debuffs, both great for Castorice. You can pair anyone with RMC and Gallagher, and it will make a good team for Castorice. They are great options if you don't have Tribi. Any other supports beside these units are either worse than any free-to-play options like the RMC, or just doesn't work with Castorice. Similar to My Day, Castorice scales of HP, so most Harmony units like Robin can't really work with her. Here are some teams that you can use with your Castorice. Any of these teams can work in both all 3 turns playstyle and the 1 turn 1 shot playstyle. In the end, it's your choice. Lastly, for the sub DPS playstyle with My Day, because of her AoE all type resistance down and the 10% damage increase, personally, I don't recommend it. Castorice is a pure DPS, the strongest one in the game right now, and you are basically downgrading her damage to play her as a sub DPS. My Day's usual hyper carry team is already good enough. You don't need to forcefully play them in a suboptimal team. Overall, Castorice is a very strong and unique main DPS. Her teams require some specific teammates, but she doesn't take away strong units from all the other teams. Like Sunday and Robin are still free to be used. The Lightcone situation is a bit sad, but since this is anniversary and her character was hyped up from the very start of 3.0, I hope you have saved enough Jades to get her signature Lightcone. And that's going to be it for my Castorice guide. To this day, this has to be my most detailed guide I've ever made, and I hope I managed to answer any questions you had about Castorice. If you still have more questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. Like and sub if you enjoy my content. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.